This is a photograph of me and my Uncle Maxwell and my grandmother's chicken soup. Most people have never seen me without a beard. I'm the one on the right. Each year, as school was about to close for the Christmas vacation, my uncle would take me to the Palm Beaches. And let me tell you, time on the beach was awesome. We'd make the trip here on a train called the Silver Meteor. It was the first diesel-powered streamliner to run between New York and Florida. Introduced in 1939, it took about 25 hours to make the trip. The train is still being run. These days, however, it's operated by Amtrak and takes 2 hours longer. I love those vacations, and to honor that memory, I thought I'd introduce my youngest son, Nicholas, to a collection of cities and towns in South Florida known as the Palm Beaches. Because you're a good student. I was not such a good student. I wasn't a bad student, but I wasn't a great student, either. Okay. Henry Morrison Flagler was born in 1830 and became wealthy beyond my wildest dreams as one of the founders of Standard Oil. He was also responsible for much of the development of Florida's East Coast. Starting in the late 1880s, Flagler began to build what he called the American Riviera. He put together a railroad that ran along the entire east coast of Florida. He also began building hotels, including the Palm Beach Inn, which in 1901 was renamed the Breakers. Flagler was also involved in some groundbreaking legislation. His wife had been in a mental hospital for 5 years. Then in 1901, he persuaded the Florida legislature to pass a law that said if you were incurably insane, it was grounds for divorce. Now, before you get excited and you want to know more about this law because you think you're married to somebody whose elevator doesn't go to the top floor, forget about it. The law was repealed a year later, and Flagler was the only one who was divorced under that law. After being granted the divorce, he remarried and with his new wife moved into his newly built home, known as Whitehall. These days, Whitehall is the Flagler Museum. It's a 75-room mansion that's considered a National Historic Landmark and open to the public.
We're in the Grand Hall of Whitehall. It's about 5,000 square feet, so it's the largest room, single room of any home of this period. This is really built to evoke a sense of a temple to Apollo. So you'd see this huge ceiling painting here.
Did they paint that on the ceiling?
No, they painted on canvas and put it on. That was typical of the time period. This is the drawing room, and it's really the room that Flagler probably put more of himself into than any other room in Whitehall because it was going to be a room his wife used most often. Well, this is the Flagler Keenan Pavilion, which the museum built a few years ago in order to house the rail car you see. The rail car is even older than Whitehall. It was built in 1886 for Flagler. It's one of his private rail cars, and rail cars were a big deal back then. Railroads were a big deal. They were the biggest industry in the country at the time, and it's one of the 2 cars he took down to Key West to celebrate the opening of the Oversea Railroad, the completion of the Oversea Railroad in 1912. 10,000 people turned out to welcome Flagler when he arrived in Key West. And it was really he basically said he could die happy at that point. He'd accomplished everything he had hoped to accomplish.
Extraordinary woodwork. It's good to be king.
Well, this was the most luxurious form of travel back in those days. And we're in the sitting room, which is where he could entertain his guests. It also doubled as a bit of an office or a study. There's a fold-down desk here.
Beautiful.
And it's amazing it survived. It's great to see.
I feel the same way about me. Ralph Norton was the head of the Acme Steel Company of Chicago, which at the beginning of the 20th century was one of America's largest industrial corporations. He had a sizable collection of art, and when he retired and moved to the Palm Beaches in 1941, he decided to share his collection with the public. The result is the Norton Museum of Art, with over 7,000 works that concentrate on European, American, and Chinese art.
And this exhibition, which we call Going Places, focuses on the way designers have depicted transportation and developed transportation.
And they got great old footage.
Fantastic. Our curator put together great footage from old movies to show that the American public has always had a great romance related to moving around the country, going places, flying, trains, and of course, the great American obsession with cars.
Oh, what's this stuff?
Well, so one of the most interesting things that has come out through Fred's collection is that the marketing of cars, and especially car interiors in the case of these drawings we're looking at here, had a great deal to do with fashion, and they linked it to fashion. So strangely, the illustrators for these wonderful car interiors, and these are just prototypes for car interiors, these are the designers dreaming about what it might be, have in many cases shown beautiful women sort of hovering ghost-like in the background of these images. And so it talks about the tremendous connection between the automotive industry and fashion, making the cars fashionable, changing them every year so that people have to buy new models. Right. So these drawings are an example of drawings that ordinarily would have been lost. And in many cases, the designers themselves, there are these great stories of them smuggling drawings out of the workroom because they were the intellectual property of GM or whoever they were working for. And people were so concerned in those days that a secret might leak, or a design element might leak, that they were often destroyed. So these are, in many cases, very rare drawings, and these show ways of looking at the same car with different tail fins, with different headlights and things like that. So this was the way they studied them. And interestingly, of course, now we do this all with computer, but these are all real drawings done with marker, watercolor, pen and ink.
Beautiful. It's Cadillac.
Yeah, fantastic Cadillac, showing how glamorous and elegant the front of that grille could be.
During the 1920s, Addison Meisner was America's best-known architect. He specialized in resort buildings that had a Mediterranean and Spanish Revival look, and his favorite locations were in South Florida. His buildings were well suited to the Florida climate, and he soon became the favorite architect of the neighborhood's rich and not so famous. He even built his own factory to produce the tiles, stones, columns, and wrought iron for his structures. Eventually, he even manufactured the furniture for his buildings. One of his classic structures is the Boca Raton Resort and Beach Club. It still has the feelings of a Meisner resort, but it's been updated to meet the 21st century taste. There are private docks so you can tie up and stay as a guest of the hotel, either in the hotel rooms or on your yacht. There are 11 different places to eat. Morimoto is their Japanese restaurant. I once took a class in sushi making, but I was never able to focus the ingredients in the very center of the rice. In fact, I was so bad that I had to spend part of my summer in remedial sushi class. Luca is the Italian restaurant, and the chef is Adam Pyle. One of his favorite dishes is sweet potato gnocchi, apples and onions. Blue identifies itself as having elevated American cuisine, which makes perfectly good sense. The restaurant is on the 23rd floor. 501 East is a restaurant devoted to burgers, salads, steaks, and a great brunch. The hotel spa is often rated by publications like Condé Nast as #1. The trademark procedure is called the ritual baths. I used to take a ritual bath every Saturday night when I was a teenager, whether I liked it or not. My son Nicholas was particularly fascinated by the flow ride, where he was given his first class in surfing. I figured if it was so much fun for Nico, I'd give it a try. The original property is on the Intercoastal Waterway, but the hotel has a second half which is on the beach, and you can travel between the two by boat. In 1492, when Columbus arrived in the Americas, there were no horses. The first horses to arrive in what is now the United States were brought to Florida by Spanish explorers. They had an extraordinary impact on the local culture, and they still do. Each year, the Palm Beaches hosts an international equestrian festival. Show jumping and dressage demonstrated by the best riders in each class. It's a 12-week event that takes place on 140 acres of specially built facilities. It looks like polo got started in China or Persia about 2,000 years ago. The game was originally used to train cavalry. By the 1500s, it was being played throughout the Eastern world. The British first saw it in India and Burma, and in 1862 founded the first polo club. Private clubs have always been a big thing with the English. British officers and tea planters introduced the sport to the West.
We go every Sunday, but we play other days of the week. Sunday's game is the day with all the pomp and circumstance, so we start out the beginning of January and we go till the end of April.
The field is 300 yards long and 160 yards wide. There are 2 goalposts, one at either end of the field, and there are 2 teams. There are 4 players on each team, and each player rides 1 horse at a time. If a player is riding 2 horses at the same time, it's considered cheating. The actual game is a lot like soccer. The objective is to drive the ball downfield and between the opponent's goalposts. The game is divided into 6 7.5-minute play periods called chukkers. When the ball passes between the goalpost, a point is scored, and the team switches to the opposite end of the field. If the team you're rooting for scores a point, you may have a glass of champagne. If you're not affiliated with either team, which is my case, you can have a glass of champagne no matter who scores. Now, Coach, I'm ready. The Roger Dean Stadium in Jupiter, Florida, is named after the man who opened the first automobile mega dealership in Florida. His namesake stadium is the only stadium in Florida to host 2 Major League Baseball teams for their annual spring training, the Miami Marlins and the St. Louis Cardinals. Over the years, I've noted that many of our famous sports teams are named after animals. Cardinals, Marlins, Bulls, Bears, Lions, Eagles, Dolphins, Seahawks. And in many cases, these teams have earned the right to be named after these intelligent and sometimes aggressive creatures. Though in some cases, the more appropriate name would be the Turkeys. I leave it to you to designate the deserving organizations. Phil Foster was one of the earliest residents of the Palm Beaches and one of the first to build a tourist court. For those unfamiliar with the term tourist court, it refers to a facility similar to a motel and is in no way associated with the federal, state, or local judicial system. Foster lived here for 32 years until he died in 1917. The park was opened in 1953 and dedicated to his memory. You can rent kayaks, paddle boards, and snorkeling gear. And more important, especially for me, you can also rent guides who will show you how to use the kayaks, paddle boards, and snorkeling gear. Actually, I'm a certified scuba diver. However, my wife has warned me that if I continue to dive in open waters, she is going to have me recertified as a nutcase. And sadly, that's only one of many reasons she could use for my recertification. The park's Blue Heron Bridge area is recognized internationally by scientists, scuba divers, underwater photographers, and snorkelers for its unique marine life. There is a snorkeling trail of limestone boulders and prefabricated reefs that run for 2 acres in a zone where the water is only 6 to 10 feet deep.
Let's go ahead and get geared up and get in the water.
In today's performance, the part of the Fearless Dive Team will be played by Nicholas Wolfe and his mother, who you may well not remember from the many Jacques Cousteau films in which they did not appear.
A lot of folks consider this the premier shore dive, not just in the United States, but possibly in the world. Part of it is ease of access. You have relatively shallow water, but you have an incredible biodiversity here. And then along that snorkel trail, you have a lot of stuff that's just basically come in here and developed a home. And it acts as a nursery of some sort for some of the other species of fish. Things like angelfish, rays, you'll see eels down there as well. A lot of folks here come here specifically for seahorses. We also have a lot of arrow crabs. We have the yellow rays that are very common in this area. And the batfish here are also very popular. It's something you don't see very commonly out on the reefs. This is one of the best places in the world to dive, but for folks who want ease of access, great biodiversity, Palm Beach County has a lot of that.
Each winter during what is officially known as the season, Palm Beach holds an antique jewelry and art show at the convention center. The season is a reference to the period of time during which the famous, infamous, and just us folks come to the area to enjoy the climate, both meteorologically and socially. The antique jewelry and art show fills the convention center with exhibitors who have something to sell and visitors looking for something to buy, or just looking.
Collectors, interior designers, art advisors, museum curators fly in from all over the world, all at one place, all at one time to be here in Palm Beach. Now, what makes it very special and really unlike any other event in the world is that we have a combination of wealth, the wealth that's cultured, the wealth that collects, and the wealth that you could basically walk from your front door to this convention center.
In 1906, at the age of 19, George Morikami immigrated from his native Japan to Palm Beach, Florida. He came here to join the Yamato colony, which was an experimental Japanese farming community. In exchange for the cost of his passage and a little spending money, he'd agreed to work for 3 years, at the end of which he was to receive $500 and a little bit of land. His plan was to sell the land, take the money, and head back to Japan. But his sponsor died, and he never got the land, and he never got the money. So he kept on working. Towards the end of the Second World War, he was able to buy his own piece of land, which he farmed for 30 years. In 1973, he donated his 200-acre farm to Palm Beach County, who turned it into a center for Japanese arts and culture. There are galleries with changing exhibits, a classic Japanese garden, a bonsai garden, a library, and a gift shop. I actually filmed here many years ago, and I bought a bathrobe. And now that I'm back, I'm going to buy another one. What do you think? I was also going to buy a headband to hold my hair back, but I don't have that much hair anymore. They also have an excellent Japanese restaurant. This is a photograph that was taken many years ago when I first filmed here. It shows the chef and his wife. And they're still here, and their cooking is better than ever. We had 2 bento boxes, a classic and a vegetarian, baked mussels with an herbed mayonnaise, yellowtail sashimi on a bed of seaweed salad, and crab cakes and bang bang shrimp. Awesome! Depending on when you are visiting the Palm Beaches, you might enjoy a free concert or opera at the Meyer Amphitheatre on the Intercoastal Waterway. Stretch out on a blanket, open your picnic basket, pop a cork, and listen to some of the great operatic arias. For the past few years, I've been living in Switzerland. And when you say culture in Switzerland, it is usually a reference to cheese, because in fact they make some of the greatest cheeses in the world. But if you say culture in the Palm Beaches, it's usually a reference to the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts, in which I have apparently attracted a smaller audience tonight, hopefully. Starting in the 1950s, the residents of this area became interested in building a facility for the performing arts. In 1985, after 35 years of unsuccessfully trying to raise the necessary funds, Alexander Dreyfus began a private fundraising initiative with a gift of $1 million from his company, the Photo Electronics Corporation WPEC-TV 12. Much of Mr. Dreyfus's work has been in the area of photography and television production. In fact, his video color negative analyzer won an Academy Award, and many of his inventions are on permanent display in the Smithsonian. Being technically impaired, I have no idea of what a video color negative analyzer does, but my friends tell me it's very important. Raymond F. Kravis was a prominent Oklahoma geologist who wintered in the Palm Beaches. Shortly after the Dreyfus gift, a group was formed to raise additional funds and name the center in honor of their friend, Mr. Kravis.
It was a community-wide effort. It took the leadership of Mr. Dreyfus and a very dedicated group of board members who really mobilized the community to fund this Performing Arts Center.
Today it's known as the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts, and it presents an extraordinarily wide selection of material. And finally, the Jupiter Inlet Lighthouse. Originally built in the mid-1800s, it's 153 feet above sea level and can be seen for 24 nautical miles. That assumes that the weather is clear and you're wearing the glasses with the new prescription. They chose this place because it looked like an ideal spot for military defense. And in fact, that turned out to be the truth. In 1940, a Navy radio detection station was set up. It was a secret installation designed to intercept German U-boat radio messages and inform U.S. forces as to where the enemy subs could be found and demolished. In May 1943, 30 German submarines were destroyed, and in June, another 37. I heard that if the installation was still in operation, it might have been able to detect the fraudulent and totally disgraceful emission system in the Volkswagen cars. That's Travels and Traditions in the Palm Beaches. Thank you, Unc, for making this part of my life. And thank you, Nicholas, for joining me. I'm Burt Wolfe. But wait, there's more. Whenever we edit one of our programs, we always end up with more good material than we can fit in. Interviews, stories, recipes. So we decided to put them on our website, burtwolfe.com.